Well, Julian, thank you for joining me today. This is a special episode for me because you're not only a great guest, but you are also a lead investor in my company. So it's nice to have you here, and thanks for joining.
Yeah, thanks for having me. 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗽𝗀. It's always a pleasure to speak to friends from Tirana and Albania.
Yeah. How does it feel to be on the other side of the table now? I'm interviewing you, not you me.
Oh, I don't think my type of interviewing with you was anywhere as hard as the one I'm going to face now with you. So I'm scared, actually. I think I feel revenge here.
Well, it's coming, so be ready. Okay, so Julian, you've been on both sides of the table. So you've been an operator, and now you are an investor. What led you into venture capital in the first place?
That's an interesting question because I did choose to go into to venture capital. I had a career in telco before, where I used to be mostly chief exec of some mobile operations, and then I was fortunate to have my own startup, which went to Y Combinator. So I did the startup cycle. I raised a lot of money and did the pivot, did everything. And I just thought a couple of things. First of all, I was a little bit tired of telecom. Frankly, I thought that after 20 years, I had kind of seen it, been there, done that. And more importantly, I was a bit tired of day-to-day operations. You know, when time comes where you've been on the bridge fighting hard, and some of my fights were very, very hard and tough on me as well. Like my assignment in Haiti was extremely difficult on me, for example, for security reasons. I was the number one on the kidnappers list for quite some time, so I was always to move around with heavy security. I just thought it might be a good idea to keep my brain working, but in a slightly different way. And this is, what I loved about VC and what I discovered when I did my own startup in California. I met tons of VC and I just say, oh, you know what? I think it's great because you can impact and influence companies almost as if you were running them by your relationship with the founder, but you don't have to deal with the day-to-day crap of being a CEO. And this was really a aha moment for me. I just say, you know what, that's what I want to do, because that's exactly, I want to stay challenged. I was too young to retire, but I was too old to fight in the trenches. And I thought VC would be a great combination. And actually, I have to confess that it has even exceeded my expectations. I have this feeling that I'm constantly challenged, that I can bring a lot of value, not only money, but I do like to bring money as a value. But I can bring, beyond money, and I can still enjoy very much the discussions I can have with you, for example, when we meet in, somewhere in the world, and we discuss, what do I think about this product, that idea as a go-to market, or this hire, or, how to deal with this or that. And before I came, I just had a great conversation in the taxi. One of our very successful companies is about to meet a potential buyer.
Nice.
In the US next week. He's going to the US to meet this guy, and he had, the whole conversation was, listen, I've never done that. How do you think I should approach this guy? And we talked about 40 minutes on a couple of key points and ideas. I give him suggestions because I don't run the company, and that's what I always tell founders. I say, look, I can give you ideas, suggestions, but in the end, you call the shot. So you see, these are the phone calls and the exchanges that I love to have and make me believe that I can still bring value on a daily basis and keep being challenged here.
And Fil Rouge now has invested in over 150 companies across Europe, right?
Yes, that's correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, if you had to describe Fil Rouge's investment philosophy, how would that be?
Investment philosophy. Our philosophy is really to invest in the region, into global projects. So, to use a marketing slogan, I would say build locally, sell globally. I think our philosophy would be really down to that. We believe a lot in the talent in the region. We believe a lot in the world being a single platform with the digitalization taking place. And we think that whilst talent is equally spreaded, capital is not, or at least was not until we came in the region. That's not entirely true. There were a couple of players in the region. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying I was the first. I'm saying we are the best, but I cannot say we are the first.
Yeah. Well, when founders hear about tier one VC, they think about Sequoia, Anderson, Greylock, etc. How do you define the tier three VC that Fil Rouge is, and do you even like that label, or would
Well,
you change it?
I think a lot of that is bullshit. Tier one, tier two, tier three. What is it? According to what criteria? It's like getting an award sometimes. You get an award, you don't even know why, or a ranking. I see people being ranked in Forbes, and they're ranked as the Forbes 100, and suddenly you find that it's Adam Neumann from WeWork, which was the biggest fraud, and Sam Bankman-Fried from FTX Exchange. So I'm always very wary about the rankings and labeling and labels. What I can say is for sure those guys are the biggest ones, and I suppose in terms of being tier one is about longevity. And if they've been around for that long, it probably means that they've had great results, and as a result, I suppose they rank in the top VCs. In terms of differences, the only differences we have with Sequoia, I suppose, is longevity. I mean, Sequoia has been around at the beginning of the VC days. I don't know the history of Sequoia, let's say
I
40,
think
50
since the
years ago.
70s or 80s, something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So 50 years ago, and we are 10 years old. So I would say we are much younger. That maybe makes us not a tier one VC. But I suppose recently one of our LPs, has given us his rankings, and his rankings are based on a multiple of financial metrics, which are hard and tangible. And we were ranked top 25% of their, few hundred funds they invested into.
Wow.
I suppose that probably makes us in the league somewhere of the guys you mentioned at some point, and that's, I suppose. So I mean, it was a long answer, but maybe we should define what is tier one, and I would certainly disagree to say that we are tier three.
Yeah, but also many founders overlook what we call tier three funds, but yet most startups are funded by this kind of smaller funds, because how I would personally define it is in terms of capital. How many, what is the size, the size of the fund? So it's 100 million and down, it's a tier three fund. 100 million to, I think, probably around 500, 600 million should be like a tier two. And then what 600 plus million is a tier one, like billions of dollars that they have in funds. But they fund like world changing companies, but these are not only, it's not the only type of companies that exist out there. Also many successful businesses that not necessarily are a $10 billion valuation company. And that's where other local partners like yourself come into play. What should founders expect from a VC like Fil Rouge in terms of involvement or expectations? How do you support founders apart from capital?
Yeah, so back to the questions of the ranking. I think it's interesting because I've always been on the opinion that if you could rank us amongst the LPs, then I think financial performance should be the metric. And then it's much harder to rank us from a founder standpoint. So your question is very interesting and to the point. At the end of the day, a tier one investor from a founder standpoint might differ a lot from a financial investor, from an LP in that fund.
Yeah.
So then it becomes clearly about your question is, what do we bring in general? What does Fil Rouge bring in particular? Well, I like to say that we bring more than money, but I'm afraid this is something that has been completely worn out by the whole industry. I mean, if you go to every website these days, everybody says, we back revolutionary founders or revolutionary ideas, and we give them more than money. So I think, but I think it is fair to say that I believe all the VCs bring more than money. I mean, we're here for our founders, and I cannot see this as a differentiator, really. Where do we differentiate ourselves? Well, we certainly are like everybody. We write more or less the same check size as our competitors. And I suppose that pretty much like almost all our competitors, when a founder calls us, we are at the other end of the line trying to help.
Yeah.
So in that, I am afraid to say that we are not so different. I think what's going to differentiate us is the chemistry we can create with founders. And there, I think that in our team, we have very personable people. And at the end of the day, what I see is that founders do love us in the good times and in the bad times. I have personally, and I know that a lot of the other partners in the fund have managed to do the same. But I have created very, very strong relationship with most of the founders I've engaged with or we've funded, and that I believe is very different. I mean, when you get a phone call from a founder that wants to discuss strategy on how to approach a potential buyer, when he's got 10 other investors on his cap table and he chooses you to do it, that probably speaks for itself. And I think that is probably one thing where we differ is then when you have our backing and the chemistry is good with one of our partner, I think you get an amazing value. Why? Because, we've been around. I mean, I've been to more than 80 countries in this planet. I've done businesses in the craziest places you can think of. And most of the situation a founder is going to encounter in his founder's life, in his startup life, I've been there. So I'm able to give him my experience and enrich his experience, his thinking, hopefully to drive him to the right decision. So that's one thing I think where we are very good and very different. The other thing where I think we are very good is speed. I think in our industry, it's a horror show. People like to convene about the next meeting, to convene about the next meeting. Decisions are long from VCs. Generally, founders always complain about that. We try to give a yes or a no very, very fast. And no is the second best answer. There's nothing worse than no answer. We really strive to be fast here. And We try to outline a deal very quickly, and the rest is mechanical execution, which can take some time, but mostly because there's a notary, there's a lawyer, or someone in between that extends this. Because the answer, the agreement of principle, you have it with us very quickly. Third thing, and I think it's the last one that differentiates ourselves, we are all partners. So whenever a founder wants to talk to us, he talks to a partner, to someone that sits at the investment committee and can bring the opportunity forward to the investment committee. There is no analyst, junior associate, senior associate,
accessibility,
whatever.
basically. It's much easier to approach the managing partner than in a more big
Absolutely.
and
Absolutely.
established.
I'm hearing more and more complaints about some of the founders. We make intros to other VCs. Some of them called me 2 weeks ago. They say, please never make me an introduction to these guys, and never make an introduction to any other startups to those guys. I mean, I've been in this business 5 years. My business is doing 50 million a year, and I'm being grilled by a junior analyst, which still didn't even get his degree. I mean, come on, you cannot be serious.
Yeah.
I say, look, I'm sorry. I made the intro to the partner, and he pushed it down to his junior analyst. And I think that's where we are very different. When you speak to us, you speak to a partner. Everybody you speak to sits at the investment committee. We have equal rights at the investment committee. So if he likes you and it works, the chemistry and the terms are good, your project is going to come for discussion to the investment committee, to the partners of the firm.
And how do you source most of the deals? Do you rely on networks, scouting programs, or people coming, or accelerators? How do you source them?
So you know that we have an accelerator ourselves.
Yes.
It's a different fund. We very much love this because that gives us an edge. We managed to get to know the founders, the ideas, and the executions very early in the process. So that's one clear channel for the funnel. We are very lucky that our brand is very good, so we get a lot of contacts through our website, and we do review that every Tuesday. So we get a lot there on the submit your deck,
Your pitch,
on our website. I have to say that in terms of quantity, maybe not so high, but in terms of quality, probably the best. We are getting introductions from other founders. You're the one here who made an intro to Brandon. I just talked to him literally. He was my last call before the call with you.
Nice.
And actually gave him a message for you. I have to confess that in quality, the best intros we get are from founders to founders.
And I really believe in his company as well. That's why I make the intro. I don't usually vouch for startups, but they are building something very unique. So kudos to them.
No, they seem very interesting. And, in terms of deal flow, I believe this is where, referral from founders are the best. And my question to the founders that make the intro is always the same. Would you put your own money into him?
I would in the case of Brandon.
You see?
Yeah.
But that's interesting because that's what you get from founders to founders.
Yeah. And if a founder sends you an email, what makes you open it and reply to the founder? Is it the idea, how he writes the email, how he approaches you?
I'm very old school guy. Maybe I should be a bit, I shouldn't be so much, but I read every email. And I think that if someone makes the effort of trying to reach out, I do always reply. And there is no real trick. I read in the email. Of course, I'm like everybody. I am buried in emails. So I suppose the best way is to make it short and attractive. Whatever you have to show, is it traction? Is it a beautiful UX design? Is it a star in the team? Whatever. in 2 lines, I should be able to tell you, listen, this is for us. Let's engage, or this is not for us. We are not interested to pursue.
And what makes a pitch stand out to you personally?
For me, I suppose what I like about the two features I really like the most in founders is humility and ambitions. I know it might sound a little bit contradictory, but humility, because the founder will eventually listen.
Yeah.
And listen to me and to other people. I'm not taking any pride when I give an idea and it's carried forward into the company. But I like and I value a founder that will give it a, a very deep thinking, And I think as a founder, to be a listener is an absolute absolute key feature of your character. And I like ambition because, I want people that move mountains. And if they are humble on top of that, they are good listeners. I think you have here in my opinion, two of the most prerequisites to be a successful founder. So, back to your question, this is what would make a pitch stand out to me.
But you also invest in idea stage, but I'm assuming that's a more rare scenario than someone that already has an MVP and has a few customers. Is traction like a good indicator to you, or like makes or breaks a deal in the early stage? So if a company just put out an MVP past the idea stage, is traction like an important metric to you?
I mean, listen, traction is always a good sign, but that's not the only sign. I mean, we've invested pre-traction. We've had massive failures pre-traction. We have very good success. I'm not saying massive success because one of them is growing like crazy. But when I mean success, we would need to wait for the exit, although I think it's going to come. But,
Yeah.
we've had successes investing pre-traction. So it's one of the indication, not the only indication by far.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, pre-revenue is pre-revenue. I mean, we are not going to ask traction pre-revenue, and we've made pre-revenue investment.
Yeah. But you also invest a lot in Central and Eastern Europe, and you are one of the very few VCs that looks into this market. What opportunities do you see emerging from this region that global VCs might miss, for example?
Well, listen, I'm not the smartest here. I read Peter Thiel's book a long time ago, From Zero to One, and it's a book that really had an influence on me, because in this book, essentially what Peter Thiel is saying is you need to create your own monopoly. And in a way, Fil Rouge is no different. It was a startup 10 years ago. I mean, God, there was nobody. There was no accelerator on the model of Y Combinator. Now, okay, you look at this now and everybody has an accelerator. But when we started, and we even started before in Slovenia with ABC Accelerator, and this was really the first ever. It was a YC-based kind of concept and an accelerator. So, the talent is here. The money and the structure was not. And what we did is we tried to be a pioneer. And with all due respect, because there was a couple of VCs, no accelerators, that we can say that with ABC Accelerator and later on with Fil Rouge Capital Accelerator, we were really the only one to do a proper accelerator program. But we decided that the region really was lacking capital, but the talent was here. So the big guys, you should maybe ask you should ask them why they're not here. I suppose it's a question of focus, like for everybody.
Yeah.
They're probably very strongly grounded in the US market, into Stanford, into Harvard or MIT for some of them on the East Coast, and that's where they hunt. That's where they fish for founders, for ideas, and they are happy with the deal flow. It might be a bit more competitive from a VC standpoint, but maybe their deal flow is bigger, which means eventually that works for them as well. So I think in our region, we try to be the VC of reference, the VC that brings money to talented people which exist and which didn't have access to capital before.
Yeah, and what I also like about Fil Rouge is that, as you said, there were other VC initiatives before in this region, but you came with a very Western approach. So it was very US approach and not like most typical European VC that are very bureaucratic. They need like a lot of data. They need to be 100% sure that the idea will work before investing in the idea. It's like the European style, but you came with a very US approach, I would say, to VC. And that's why you have been proven successful so far, because you also took much bigger risks than the other.
Well, look, Albi, I mean, you're probably a good judge of that,
Yeah.
considering you got some investment from us. So I'm sure you talk to other VCs and you can really well compare. I don't talk to other VCs about investment. That's the nature of the side of the fence we are on. You can talk about it. I'm really glad to hear it, and because I believe in this vision, I believe in being fast. I believe also that there's only so much due diligence you can do on a pre-revenue concept.
Mm.
So why procrastinate? If the idea is good, the founder is good, and the team has the conviction about both. What else is to be checked? Not much, I'm guessing. Let's get on with it, and let's do the deal.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm glad you see this as a differentiator. I told you at the beginning that speed of execution was clearly a differentiator, and I'm glad it seems to be recognized by the market.
Yeah, totally. What is not one, but what are some of the mistakes that you see early stage founders make when trying to reach to VCs like you?
It goes back to humility and ambitions. I hate when people try to stand out just for the sake of standing out.
Mm-hmm.
It's money we're talking about. We're about to write a check. Okay. So, don't try to stand out. It's a serious matter. Okay. The second one is, I see sometimes founders negotiating, about valuation because they see, fundraising as a trophy. But actually, if you were a good founder, and, for us, sometimes we walk away from deals when the founder negotiates.
Mm.
And you know what? It's not even that we couldn't do the deal at the level of the valuation he would like or the amount of money he would like. It's because what we've proposed is so close to what he wants that
Yeah.
if he was half smart, he would just say, you know what? It's money. It's fast money. And any additional time I'm wasting negotiating, I'm wasting this time not focusing on my business, and actually I'm losing value here. So
Especially
and
in
that
early
is,
stage. Yeah.
what difference it makes when you try to be at 5 million valuation or 5.5. I mean, you talk a few percent, and we see founders on the second, third call. They say, listen, we are okay with the proposal, but we really want 5.5. And then I said, I don't say, but we walk away from the deal because
Yeah.
it's just not, these are signs that the guy doesn't have the right focus,
Mm.
you know? And that is a second mistake I really see a lot is the whole trophy about fundraising, which really essentially leads you to vanity. And vanity is known for not driving good business decisions.
Yeah. Now, post investment, let's say somebody you invest in a startup. What are your expectations from the founder?
The-
I will also give my take into what you will say as well.
Sure. Listen, the outcome we all want to is money. Let's not be blind here.
Yeah.
I hear a lot of VCs, we are founders friendly, and I say, listen, stop the bullshit. Okay. You are only as good as the money you return to your LPs. Okay. That is clear. Without our investors, we do not exist. It's simple. There is no Julien, there is no Albi on this call if I don't have a couple of guys that have trusted us and invested more than 100 million into Fil Rouge Capital so far. So that's the outcome. From a founder standpoint, what I expect is transparency. I love that. I know that business. I've been in business before.
Yeah.
I reported many times bad news to my board. Hopefully, I reported them more times good news. Otherwise, I wouldn't have stayed so long in the industry. But I did report bad news, and I think transparency is certainly something that I value above everything. Also, if you think about it, it's the best way to help you. I'm not going to help you if everything goes well, but if you have challenges, I'm going to help you. I'm going to pick up my phone and make an intro to this potential client, or maybe speak to the client that rejected you and ask him to reconsider. I mean, whatever. I can help you. I can only help you as much as you're going to be transparent with me. The global picture, money, let's not, hide ourselves here. It's money.
If
we are in the
you
money
don't
game.
perform, if you don't give a return, then nobody.
Then we don't exist.
Yes.
Okay.
Both of us.
Yeah. And then from founders, transparency.
Yeah. And what I liked about Fil Rouge is because when we finished the investment together, one of the questions I asked you is, what do you expect from me to make this relationship as successful as possible? So do you need like bi-weekly investor updates, monthly investor updates, quarterly investor updates? And what stood out to me was that you said, Albi, I believe your time is better spent in building the company. If you have anything, reach out to me. If you need anything, reach out to me. Don't waste your time on sending me updates only when we need, like, to stay compliant with your regulations, that you need your own updates. Then just provide that. But other than that, just focus on building the company and just ask us whenever you need something, and hopefully we can help you. So that was something that stood up to me, let's say.
Yeah, we believe in that. We are light touch. We are not here if you don't need us. We are more than here if you need us. That has always been our philosophy. It works well that way. We have about 160 founders, and I can say that except one or two assholes, which inevitably are everywhere. I'd be surprised if more than 1% or 2% of our founder base would tell you that we are not decent people to have on the cap table.
Yeah, and what is your average check size to startup? So how does that vary?
I mean, our sweet spot is to start, let's say, with 500,000 to $1 million, something like that, and then with a very big capacity to follow on. So ideally, we start with 500K, from 250 to 500, and the capacity to deploy about 3 million per company.
And of course, you continue on the follow-on rounds as well, so you can keep your.
Yes, that's what I meant by up to 3 million. So the first check would be 5 million. Then we would do a fast follow-on, like a bridge or into the seed or the Series A. So very quickly, if we see growth, that's what we've done with some of our most successful companies. We did 250 in one, 500 in the other one, and then very quickly, 6 months down the line, we invested another 500 in one and 1 million in the other. And then we did another third round when they raised more. We, of course, took our pro rata and showed signs of of trust to the other newly coming investors. So we came at about 2.5 million, but that was our old fund. The
Yeah.
new fund has the capacity to go higher than 3 million that way.
And your new round now, can we share the size? Yes, because it's not completely closed. The new fund that
The new
you have.
No, the new fund we are still raising. We are at almost 50 million now
Yeah.
raised, and we have a very good chance to way past the 60 million range. So we are in a very good spot at the moment.
Nice.
So yeah, we're in discussions with much more than 60 actually. So we will close in March next year, probably way past 60.
That's
So
amazing.
plenty of dry powder to invest in good companies, including yours.
Amazing. Now, can you share some stats, for example? I know you invested in more than 150 companies, but what are some of the standout companies in your portfolio? How many exits do you have, or things like that?
Yeah, look, we're still very young because the portfolio. I mean, we're starting in 2016. As you know, the cycle in early stage is young, but we are quite fortunate. I would need to check exactly how many exits we have, but we should be close to about 10 exits now. Most of them being very good exits. We had a few 4 to 5x exit in a very short amount of time. We had a very good 2x exit, but it was in what was it in 3 years,
Yeah.
tenure of the investment. So the RR was still in the 80% range. So let's say about 10 exits. I would need to check exactly the number. What else can I tell you? We have a couple of companies. We have 3 companies, let's say in the 300 to $500 million valuation range at the moment. So this is very good. Another stats which I kind of like is that when we started Fund 2, our aggregate companies were altogether making 11 million of turnover yearly.
Okay.
Last year, our investment group did 600 million turnover.
Wow. That's a huge jump.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, we take these stats, and it's a metric that we kind of invented at Fil Rouge because it's very difficult to track the valuation if you look at the valuation from an accounting standpoint, which
Mm.
we are forced to do, which is fine. This is the way the industry works. But I said, there must be a better way to track progress. And I said, okay, we're going to take all our companies at this day, and we look at what they were doing even before we invested from the beginning of the fund. And
Mhm.
that's our starting point, which we adjust every year. And of course, we look at what they do now, and yeah, we've grown the revenue significantly by 60 times. So
That's
you can
amazing. That's amazing.
possibly assume, which is quite interesting, that the valuation of the portfolio should be probably following that curve, but this remain to be seen.
Well, that's amazing news. Now, I saw that one of your portfolio companies is also in the space industry. I think
Yes,
it's a Croatian company, if I'm
yes,
correct. Yeah.
yes.
How do you see companies from Europe entering in the space market? Because Europe is very regulated, and we see very successful stories from US, like SpaceX, Blue Origin. You see Boom
Yeah.
Aerospace now that is making a lot of waves. Can Europe
I
compete
mean,
into that space?
look, we very much like this guy. Is crazy enough to be ambitious, but he's very humble. And it's funny you asked about him. He was the one I talked again this afternoon. So you can see I'm busy I talked to him before taking my flight, actually. So you can see I spoke to 3 founders this afternoon, 4 with you. So by the way, that's you were asking about what I like about the job. This is what I do. So you can see that a day like today, I will have spoken to four founders. So I spoke to Benz a bit earlier on, and I liked him because Benz has this. First of all, he has a contract with SpaceX. He has direct allocation of
Okay.
payload into SpaceX. It's probably one of the rare ones. Listen, I'd like to tell you, first of all, I have to tell you that I'm really not an expert in space tech.
Mhm.
We've made an investment into Benz because we love the guy. We think that we thought he was exactly ambitious and humble, and he was really trying to do something very interesting with a completely different approach. I think that to your question, how is it? I think it's going to be a bit difficult for Europe, just because Europe lacks venture capital. And you will need venture capital to support space tech, and a lot of it. Space tech, pretty much like biotech, are industries where it's very difficult to make a difference if you don't invest 5-10 million at the beginning.
It's very capital intensive.
It's extremely capital intensive.
Yeah.
And as you know, Europe very, very much lags behind VC capital in general, which means I think the space tech scene is going to be, it's going to take time for the space tech scene to really take off, I would say. There will be a few exceptions. We hope Genesis is one of them. And it looks like he's onto something extremely interesting. He's going to have 2 launches next year. He's going to launch 3 microgravity capsule of 8 kilos in space. And he was telling me that the market is enormous.
Very impressive. Uh, what are the type of companies that you invest mostly? So is it SaaS? Is it other type of companies? Is it more B2B and B2C? Which one are, uh, or do you have an investment thesis where you focus on, or you are industry agnostic? How do you
I mean,
approach?
look, you about industry, we try to invest in industries we can understand.
Mm-hmm.
So in the case of Benz and Genospace, so Genesis, it was quite easy to understand what he's doing. I mean, he's creating a microgravity capsule where people can test things in gravity. It can be mostly at the beginning. It's on the agricultural chemical side of things. But he was telling me that the need for testing will be so big, and it will go across all segments. Everybody will want to test gravity in their own industry. So we are not really expert in space. We thought we could understand what he's doing, and that's why we made a bit of an exception. So it's generally the things we can understand, like your company. I'm not an expert in regulation, but it was very easy for us to understand that this is going to be mandated anyway. So there will be a market there. Hopefully, you'll be the one to snatch it. But when we can understand the concept, it's paraphrasing Warren Buffett, who only invests in the things he understands. So that's what we do.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, B2B SaaS, we are telco guys. We have a bit of a bias here because, this is what we've done all our life. We've sold telephones for people to use the service and pay a recurring fee. Cost of acquisition, long-term value of customers, cohort analysis, all these other things things that talk to us when we look at a business. So we like that. Doesn't mean that we don't venture out a bit of that, but I would say B2B SaaS in the industries we understand is probably a fair way to define our investment strategy.
What are 3 things founders should do before pitching to Fil Rouge?
Well, I think I would say to portray energy is very important. we need energy. It's hot enough, because with energy comes motivation. That's the first thing. The second is, don't underestimate the design of your deck.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're somehow, in a way, you're selling yourself to us. Okay. And so you're a sales guy, essentially, or a sales
Yeah.
girl, whatever. And I think if you do a good job at selling your story to us, there's a big chance that you're going to be capable of doing the same to your customers. And that is an essential point here, because the first year or 2 years of your startup, it's going to be a founders led sales strategy. It's you, Albi, who is going to make the first 1,000 sales here, just
Yeah.
because you understand the product better than anyone, and you are the only one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's two. And the third one, as I said, prepare your ideal amount that you want to raise, have an idea of your valuation, and don't negotiate too much.
Mm.
Because at some point, what I mentioned earlier, negotiation is a waste of time.
Yeah.
And when
Especially this
someone,
early. Yeah. I totally
yes,
agree.
exactly. And when someone very early in your life is prepared to write a check, there are not going to be so many people keen to give you some money in this market. It's a buyer's market. It's a VC market.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind. Get the
Yeah.
money and get going.
Well, Julien, thank you very much for joining me today. And what I loved about this conversation is because we clarified a little bit what tier 3 means. So it doesn't mean smaller, but it means closer to founders, to the ground, to the problems that actually matter. And thank you for also being part of the EU presence story, and for helping founders everywhere see that getting funded isn't about where VC ranks, but it's about finding someone that truly believes in your mission. Thank you.
Exactly. That's what it is. Thanks for having me. Thank you, Albi. 𝗖𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗽𝗀𝗀𝗀🐶𝗵𝗽𝗀𝗀🐬